Mr. Chairman, members of the Academy, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, may I follow the same usul, the same method, by saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Allow me to say that it is a great honor to be invited to speak to this august audience, and I would like to begin with a word of thanks to Professor Dovramaji and the president of this university and their colleagues for organizing and hosting this important meeting. Some of you may wonder why I want to speak about a theme, a topic, which looks rather specific, that is to say, the role of universities or the university as an institution in promoting the alliance of civilizations. One of the reasons is this: in the current global predicament, which we all face in one way or another, cultures and civilizations, that is to say, our interpretations and understandings of them, have begun to play an extremely important role. Due to many reasons that we cannot touch upon here, the whole world is going through a kind of culture shift. Cultures, civilizations have come to be important and even strategic items or categories, if you like, especially in the last 2 decades or so. Some of us talk about a clash of civilizations or a clash of cultures in such a way and through such a discourse that they are and will be in the more incoming decades the main causes of international crises or conflicts. And some talk of not clash of cultures, but clash of ignorance. Different kinds of narrative and counter-narrative are known by all of us. It is especially known that these narratives are mostly developed in the academic circles and widely spread among public at large. Especially the so-called clash arguments have powerful academicians behind them, such as Huntington, Bernard Lewis, and others. If and when we take into account the fact that many of these academicians serve the powerful decision-making circles as well-respected advisors, it is not difficult to guess the complicated and multidimensional relationship between universities and political circles or even political establishments. Honesty and fairness compel us to see that many academicians did not fail to reject the clash arguments in question, but this succeeded little as far as the destructive influence of these arguments, especially in the power centers and in the street, is concerned. Various culturalists and civilizationists, I would like to underline the word culturalist and civilizationist, not cultural and civilizational in the descriptive sense of these two terms, arguments are evolving in a fairly dangerous way regarding multiculturalism, integration of different communities, coexistence, eventually the word security and peace. They are mostly essentialist, fundamentalist, exclusivist, and divisive in nature. They appeal to emotions of general public and unashamedly cover the real and the root causes of the predicament which I tried to refer to. It is just here and now, to use the Heideggerian terminology, a stronger and louder scientific and rational intervention is urgently needed. And the university is the first and the foremost location for such a powerful voice. Why? To begin with, the university as an institution has been the house of wisdom, the house of knowledge, research, and teaching. It is there we accumulate our knowledge regarding cultures and civilizations. It is there we educate our children for life, for democracy in our global city, which cries out for a broader vision and for coexistence that can only be founded upon commonly shared values and upon respect for religions, cultures, and civilizations. All this points to the roles and functions of the university as one of the important human institutions. We know that there are good departments in many prestigious universities where cultures and civilizations are studied, researched, and taught, but they are no longer enough. For example, providing professional education in the departments of Arabic and Islamic studies or Oriental studies, so to speak, in general, is not enough to remove the existing knowledge deficit that infects many areas, especially international relations and international politics. We need more departments, more chairs, new approaches, and more financial support so as to lessen at least the irksome influence of ignorance existing now. Despite the multiplicity of the ways and means regarding the attainment of knowledge and information, the epistemic confusion seems to be at its highest stage. Unfortunately, the means that lead us to information can also easily lead us to misinformation and even to epistemic pollution. Let us take one step further. Supposing that we reached usable knowledge, reliable and usable, we all know that the rational use of knowledge in praxis requires something else, something more. In the appropriate application of knowledge, cultivating and educating the general powers of intellect is not less important. In fact, the two go together. I am borrowing this phrase, that is to say the general powers of intellect, from John Henry Newman's well-known book on the idea of a university, which was published more than 1.5 centuries ago. For him, a university is an institution in which human mind develops, tries to analyze and integrate ideas and knowledge belonging to different scientific disciplines. So in a way, I am happy that you use the word ulum rather than funun, which is more, in a way, more power to cover other disciplines apart from biology, physics, chemistry, and so on and so forth. University relates one human faculty to other, and thus one human experience to other. That is to say, it works hard and continuously to reach a synthesis between the cognitive, the aesthetic, and the moral experiences of human person. The university paves the way for dialogue that proceeds by basing itself upon the major principles, the three major principles: reliable and usable knowledge, a fully functioning critical mind, and ethically responsible approaches to world issues. A little while ago, I referred to new approaches in the fields of research and education. Most of us here know by experience that universities do not function in vacuum. To see this, let us have a look at the Islamic and Middle Eastern studies in some well-known Western universities. During the period of the so-called classical Orientalism, good academic studies, especially regarding world cultures and civilizations, were carried out in many well-established institutions, universities. But later on, many scholars have come to realize that from many points of view, Orientalism take, for example, great world civilizations as something static, monolithic constructors, or even entities. In other words, it developed different versions of certain grand narratives which were not always in harmony with empirical facts and logical coherence. This was especially true as far as studies on Islamic civilization were concerned. Studies on Islamic Civilization is a well-known book, collected articles by Gibb, Professor Gibb, one of the most important Orientalists that we had. After the Second World War, the so-called area studies became fairly fashionable. This approach, too, bore many important fruits, despite serious shortcomings regarding the effort of synthesizing the pieces and painting a fuller picture. It was perhaps due to this situation in the last decade or so, projects with global import, with global dimensions, have begun to move to the fore. World history approach, both in the area of research and education, has begun to draw more attention in some universities. This approach has added values when we want to understand cultures and civilization in a more comparative and broader light. Practically at every phase of development in the campus life, there are satisfactions, there are also disappointments, so far as the roles and functions of universities in plural are concerned. Here we should try as much as we can to avoid generalizations and stereotypings. There are good universities, there are also less successful universities. Especially the developing universities in many parts of the world work under heavy pressures coming from different sources, such as official circles, non-state actors, and so on and so forth. It is strongly claimed that in the last decade or so, there is a visible deterioration in intellectual integrity and in the standard of academic civility and in academic ethics in general. In many universities in the Muslim majority world, for example, there are still many subjects, many topics, many fields even, that are considered to be under taboos. Those who study them may ruin their academic careers and even face imprisonment, as we all know the things that are happening around us. Certain powerful circles can manipulate and force at least some universities to do things that have nothing to do with academic performance the universities are supposed, in fact, obliged to carry out. To a lesser extent, similar problems exist in Western countries as well. Human rights organizations, for example, Human Rights Watch, issued many reports referring to serious human rights violation in the campus life, especially after the tragic 9/11 event. Campus-oriented critics are sometimes punished openly and sometimes in a more subtle and discreet way. As I said earlier, universities are there to analyze and to criticize anything worthy of analysis and criticism. But we all see that certain criticisms, especially those relating to foreign policy issues, face from time to time harsh and rather irrational reactions coming from states and non-state circles, action. Let me give you an example. Some of you may have heard the activities of some groups, even institutions. For instance, in the United States, where we have the highest academic standards, at least in some universities. An outfit, a website called Campus Watch, I'm sure many of you have heard of it, run by a well-known academician, I don't want to mention any names, by the way, and his colleagues tries to monitor practically all departments dealing with Islamic and Middle Eastern studies. Those academicians who do not share the extreme right-wing views of the Campus Watch could easily be labeled as apologists for terrorism. The late well-known Edward Said, for example, was called the professor of terror in the eyes of the Campus Watch, which blacklists the academicians, the universities, whose agendas are not in harmony with those of the Campus Watch. For instance, the scholars who believe that a liberal democratic approach is needed, and, for example, those who claim that, again, a liberal and democratic approach to religiously oriented political movements in the Middle East can be very useful in terms of political appropriation and accommodations are considered as dangerously naive vis-à-vis fundamentalism, extremism, and terrorism. Some self-appointed monitoring groups put forward harsh and destructive criticisms against certain governments which try to act courageously and independently in around their regions. They can easily be considered, for example, as Islamo-fascist, a term which has been invented recently in order to silence the voices that strongly protest the rise of Islamophobia in the West. It urgently called the students to monitor the professors and send the collected information to the Campus Watch so as to compile dossiers on academicians and institutions. By the way, the patron of this institution was installed by the American administration as a member of the United States Institute of Peace, UN Institute of Peace. Actually, he was going to become the president of this institute, but some reactions arose, and now he had to be satisfied with becoming only a member of the Peace Institute. Many American Armenians, by the way, are trying to do the same thing concerning the Ottoman and Turkish or Turkic studies are concerned. In the United States, for example, they want to silence the academicians who do not share their views regarding the 1915 event and award those who agree with their agendas. Many postgraduate students have become hesitant, for example, to study socio-political movements in the Muslim world. They feel that they are being watched. The books, articles they read are listed and sent to security organizations. This is not the only example. There are many other right-wing organizations in many parts of the world which are becoming more intolerant regarding certain academic activities of some universities in their region. For instance, a fundamentalist Christian group called Family Policy Network has recently opposed to the inclusion of a text on Islam in a reading list in the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, claiming that teaching Islam tantamount to propagating Islam and paving the way for extremism and terrorism. I wouldn't really mention any of these unhealthy developments in and around universities if they were only exceptional. Exist, they do. But I will have to keep my promise and try to avoid generalizations. What I say here is only one part of the whole picture. There are excellent universities and brave academicians that defy pressures of all kinds or all interventions which are not in keeping with the intellectual integrity, academic freedom, and ethical principles. For example, hundreds of academicians protested the activities of the Campus Watch I mentioned and asked the institution that the outfit should add their names to its infamous blacklists. So as to support this kind of reaction, this kind of oppositions, and this kind of activities, we need more umbrella organizations working internationally, more twinning between universities in different parts of the world. Also needed, we need more concerted efforts, joint efforts to make our universities more liberal and more democratic. We cannot talk of culture, civilizations, politics, religions, ways of life, unless we secure enough academic freedom, which is the cornerstone of all scholarly, scientific, and artistic activities in universities. Allow me to conclude with one more reference to the indispensable role of the university in our understanding of commonly shared civilizational values on which no culture, no religion, no way of life can claim a monopoly. I am saying this because usually when we talk about commonly shared values, we hear people talking about Western values, European values, as if they were not exist or they did not exist, for example, in other cultures, in other civilizations. We have to know more about world cultures and civilizations. Some recent polls clearly show that this is not the case, unfortunately. For example, 2005 Gallup's findings clearly show that in the West, when Western students were asked what they admire about Islam and about Muslims, the highest response among respondents, around 35%, was nothing. They found nothing to admire. And the second highest, I do not know. Putting them together, the percentage is around 60%. That was the reason that I said knowledge deficit. Perhaps students in the Muslim world are in a better position, some of you may be surprised, vis-à-vis the Western culture and Christianity. Why? Because both in culture and in fundamental text, we have some knowledge regarding Christianity, Judaism, and so on. And also, since practically all countries are in the process of Europeanization, Westernization, at least we have to have the basic knowledge as far as Western cultures and civilization are concerned. However, none of us can say that such amount of knowledge itself is enough for a rational and dialogical communication. We all know that there have been many important initiatives that aim to do something positive and constructive regarding the situation I tried to describe. The Alliance of Civilization project is one of them. This initiative was launched by the Secretary General Kofi Annan, the UN Secretary General, and co-sponsored by the Prime Ministers of Turkey and Spain. The report by the high-level group of eminent personalities chosen by the Secretary General himself has already completed its mandate, completed the report, so to speak. I happen to be one of the co-chairs of this initiative. We are going to have our last meeting on the 13th November, in a week time, that is to say, in Istanbul. The two Prime Ministers will deliver the report to Mr. Annan, the Secretary General. They will also have the chance, the opportunity during that meeting to settle the issues regarding the implementation mechanisms. To succeed in the realization of the aim of this noble project and similar projects, we believe that universities will play, as I tried to point out, a significant role, a fact that is clearly stated and underlined both in the analytical part of the report and in the accommodations part of the report. The report is going to be an action-oriented and action-driven report. In other words, there is a long analysis of the present predicament, present political situation, and also some concrete recommendations as well. Many thanks for your attention and for your kind patience. Thank you very much.